You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hey, people-centric leaders. This is Stephanie Anderson. We're excited to have you back for another episode of the People Centric Podcast. And with me on the pod today, I don't know if I've ever said the pod before. They're shaking their heads at me. I've never said this before. Who knows where that came from?
I like it.
Thank you. Bethany Taff is on the pod with me today.
This is the People Centric Pod.
And Diana Royalty, who I'm embarrassing thoroughly by continuing to say the pod.
The pod. I don't know if this is going to catch on or not. But it's only reminding me of that show Love is Blind.
Oh.
Because they're all in those, they start out in the pods. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Well,
I've only watched a couple episodes of that, but it was intriguing.
It's a weird kind of interesting show. If you like reality television, I'd say definitely watch it. It's got all the drama.
Our phone booths are kind of like pods too.
They are. And if you guys were in the pods with me, I would definitely make a connection. I love you both.
Oh, wow. That's so nice. Well, to no surprise, I've taken us thoroughly off track. But coming back to our topic today, if you've been a longer time listener of the People Centric Podcast, you know that we like to kind of collect new businessy jargon terms and talk about them on the podcast. And so we have a new one to bring to you today, actually two, but one we're going to start with that came from a newsletter I received from SHRM earlier. If you don't know what SHRM is, it's something Society of Human Resources. Okay. But the human resources people just rolled their eyes at me for sure. But SHRM, and we worked with SHRM. They're awesome. And I subscribed to their newsletters just to keep up with what's going on in HR. And they sent out one recently that had a term I had never heard before. And it's called skills fishing. Skills fishing. And here's what SHRM said is they said that this is a term that's really gaining traction in HR circles. And what it describes is when you have a candidate who comes in and you're hiring and they interview like brilliantly. They do a great job in the interview. Kind of their resume is just spectacular. It's beautiful. It hits everything that you want. The interview goes really well. So you hire them. But then once they get started in the job, you realize that the skills they advertised are not really there, that they're maybe lacking, and that maybe you've done a bad hire. And so SHRM points to especially the advent of AI, like AI can now generate resumes and everybody has all these polished personal brands and there's interview coaches that can help you just learn how to better interview. So I brought this term to Diana and Bethany and said, I think we should talk about this because our hunch is it's a new word for maybe something that's been happening a long time and maybe far before AI, and maybe we're creating stigma around something we shouldn't. So we're going to talk about skills fishing. And then while we were prepping for this, Diana, you introduced another term that we're going to include.
Yeah, I saw a phrase called skills maxing, which is where you are constantly upping your skills, whether that's through experience or content or certifications or online courses or whatever. You're constantly maxing your skills. So I thought it played well with skills fishing, and we could talk about both of them.
Yeah. Did you skills max to skill fish? and get a job that you weren't the right fit for? I don't know.
I'm too old to understand that sentence.
I feel that way too. But I want to kind of open it up, okay? Because I think when I heard the explanation of skills fishing, to be honest, one of our initial thoughts that we talked about was like, this isn't new. Maybe the AI part is new, but this is something that businesses really do struggle with, is finding the right hires. So maybe if you guys could jump in and let's share of like, where do we actually see companies struggle to find the right candidates, and what are some of those pitfalls that are maybe causing them to accidentally get the wrong person in the role and be able to even accuse someone of skills fishing?
Yeah, so I was gonna say when I was young, back in the day, people just called this padding their resume, right? You padded your resume, you fluffed your resume. It was just you added a little bit that maybe you did know, but you didn't like know, right? And the one that came to mind for me was, back in the day, everyone was like, I'm proficient with Microsoft Office Suite. And then since I was hiring and training admins, I would go in and be like, great, just use this Word template, create this thing. And they'd be like, well, I don't know how to do this, this, or this. And I was like, oh, I thought you were proficient in Microsoft Office Suite, right? And so
You didn't have to call me out so rudely publicly on I will say that's why I don't put Excel on mine, because I'm like, I'm an Excel basic user, not a power user, for sure.
Yeah. I'm not like Dawn who can
spreadsheet, but I can't. I don't know all
right
shortcuts.
Yeah, I can read it. Yeah.
I can manage one, like once it's done, I can not mess it up. I can do that. But you start getting into some of the formulas and stuff, and I'm like, and pivot tables, and we're out. I'm out. But yeah, so it was stuff like that. And I think a lot of people put that they were proficient in something, and then they got hired because it says proficient. And then the expectation is different, right? Like my expectation of proficient in Word is much higher than most other people's expectation and proficiency in Word. So I think it's just I think a lot of times it was, I'm trying to get in front of an employer and tell them that I can do something, right? So I'm just going to say that I'm proficient at this, or I can do this. And then B, what the expectation of proficient actually is. And as an interviewer, I didn't ask that question. I didn't give that test. I didn't dig deeper on that. So I think this is something that's been around for a long time, seeing as how I just used a Microsoft Word reference. So it's been around a long time, and people have been doing this for a very long time. What did we call it now? Skills fishing. It was just padding your resume back in the day.
Skills fishing. Yeah, I agree with that. I think like I'm going to assume as long as there have been job postings and resumes, somebody's lied about something on their resume. So that's, I would say, I think, yeah, like I don't know that this is totally new. I could though see where maybe it's getting worse with AI, because AI doesn't know you. AI doesn't know your skills. I mean, you can tell it certain things. But yeah, it would be pretty easy to go in and be like, if I see, let's say even my role at People Centric, if People Centric posted for an engagement specialist, I could feed ChatGPT the job description and say, write a resume that matches this job. So I totally see where it's possible this is becoming worse. And also like, that wasn't a tip. Don't do that. But it could generate that for you. So I guess I'm curious to hear from you both then, is like, how could you tell in an interview if somebody was maybe skills fishing, or like how could you tell if somebody really is just like, wow, they're really good at interviewing but maybe not a right fit for this role? Like how do you interview for skill?
I mean, one thing that we do a lot, I think in our interviews, at least the interviews that I've done, is like we try to give some real scenarios, which I think are really helpful, because then you're not talking theoretically, you're talking like in reality and saying like, here's something that's actually happened. Here's a situation that's actually happened, and helping kind of see how they would approach that, or being able to use like real life examples and things like that. I think those are helpful. It's not that's the hard thing though about, I think, interviews is like people can say lots of things in interviews and you can't totally control for that. But I think that that's one thing that we do that's helpful versus just saying like, tell us what your strengths and weaknesses are, right? Like people can people can say whatever, but I think as much as you can, like trying to create applicable real life scenarios, I think has been beneficial from my experience.
I totally agree with you, Bethany. I'll also say I do think, to Stephanie's point, I do think it's gotten harder. I think that AI and the internet and I don't know, probably a lot of like work talk and work coaches and interview coaches and all of those things have made the ability to read someone and their skills harder because they've trained for this. They generally know the questions that are going to get asked in an interview, and they have rehearsed and trained to do that well. At least the top candidates have, right? And I think they're using resources like Work Talk and LinkedIn and AI to generate really good responses and to study and do this well. So I think, and even like responses to your email, so that communication's not always genuine or authentic, and it's AI created, and it's getting harder to tell in a candidate. So I think all of that does make, Bethany, what you were saying, it really important that you use real life scenarios. You decide what's really important in the job and ask questions to get to those outcomes, to get to how that person would respond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I would say, I think one question, I've heard our team ask in interviews, whether we're hiring for ourselves or sometimes we'll help our clients hire people, is not just what would you do, but how would you do that? Because I think to Diana's point, I think like really well prepared candidate will have kind of rehearsed in their head some answers to questions they think you might ask them. So if you say like, yeah, Diana, what would you do if XYZ? And she might have a really polished answer for that. But then if I followed up with like, okay, and how would you do it? Describe your process to me. That can tell me a lot more sometimes than just you knew the right answer. Instead of like, yeah, describe your process to me. How would you do that? Walk me through that. Who would you talk to? What questions would you ask? Where would you go to look for that information to really see if they have that skill? Because my hunch here is that the skills fishing is maybe being felt more in organizations that tend to heavily hire based on personality, right? And we'll hear this from our candidates sometimes. They're like, wow, well, we're so disappointed it didn't work out because we really liked them. I'm like, well, you can really like somebody and like you can make friends through the interview process, but that doesn't mean they're a great fit for you. And I know I've dug into like a client interview process before, and I look at the questions, and their first like handful of questions are, tell me about you, tell me about your past work experience. And they end up just talking about the candidate's life or things they've done in the past. And that feels really warm and relational. But then it's like, well, you spent 30 out of the 45 minutes you planned for this interview. Just now I know their partner's name, their kid's name, where they went to college, clubs and things they're a part of. But I accidentally did not really ask about specific work experience or specific things like that. So I think that's another thing I would add is like, don't overemphasize the personality in the interview. Like, get to know this person, make sure they're going to mesh with your culture and with your team. But I think honestly, a lot of people just actually miss asking like the really critical skills questions sometimes.
Yeah, and I also think that how do I say this? A lot of times people are looking for the wrong skill in an interview. So I'm trying to think of an example. I was working with a retail store one time, and they were hiring for a retail clerk to run the register. And the owner kept saying, I need a problem solver. And so they kept interviewing for a problem solver. And so finally I just sat down, and she couldn't find anyone, right? She was like, none of these people are problem solvers. And I sat down with her and I said, what problems are occurring at your cash register that you're trying to have them solve for, right? What are the things that are coming up? And she was like, well, they're not just retail cash register people, they're customer service people. And when the customers come and bring a problem, they're upset about a warranty, they're upset about a refund, they're upset about whatever, I need them to be able to solve that. And I was like, okay, great. I can work with this, right? But now you're looking for a customer service representative, not just a cashier, right? And I think those are two different jobs. And your job description is for a cashier when you really want a customer service representative. And so I think it's also about thinking about the job really clearly and who you really want in that role, and designing not just the job, but also the interview questions for that role specifically. So, and being specific about it. So I even dug in on like, okay, when there's a problem with a customer, what do you want them to be able to do, right? Because problem solving is so vague in general that I think they were probably running into people that were problem solving, but just not in the exact way that she was looking for. So I tried to get it to be like, okay, what characteristics are you looking for? And how do we ask questions around those characteristics that will show not just who you're hiring, but what characteristics you're hiring for? Does that make sense? I don't know if I said that.
Yeah, and Bethany, you said something like that when we were prepping for this. So I would love your input on that, like of like when you're looking at the job and like what's your role as the employer in this?
Yeah, whenever I saw this, I was like, I feel skeptical. I feel a little skeptical of the skills fishing, not because I don't think I think that it happens. I just think that I think it's really easy to blame the candidates, than to like blame yourself as an organization that like maybe we didn't do a good job of explaining what the role actually is or what our expectations were for the position, either in the hiring process or like early on in onboarding. And so I think that that's a big part of this process too, is like to not neglect. Don't just be so quick to say like, oh, I think this person was just skills fishing and they lied and they used AI and blah, 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 blah. But like, I would sort of like turn inwardly first and just say like, before you do that, maybe evaluate how, like what Diana said, like, how did we explain the role in the hiring process, and how are we explaining it and training this person in the onboarding process now? And do they have clear expectations? And are we giving them good feedback along the way, like really early feedback so that they can be successful in the role? And I think like Diana, you said something earlier too when we were talking about it, was like also like maybe they're just new at the position. So if they're not like super successful at it right at the beginning, unless like they have just told you like really bad lies, like really clear lies that like, I know how to use a computer. They don't know how to turn it on. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's a big problem. So I'm not saying that never happens, but I just think like give people grace, and don't forget to look at yourself and your processes and how you set it up before you are quick to be like, they obviously used AI and they are malicious and trying to bamboozle us. When it's like, well, I think most people just like they want to sell themselves in an interview. They want to get the job. They probably need the job. They're looking to be successful in their careers too. And so hopefully, like, let's give people the benefit of the doubt in the process.
Yeah, and I think my word example earlier, where I was hiring because it said proficient at Word, right? My expectation of proficient was different than theirs. And I think they were able, right? A synonym of proficient is probably able, right? Like they were able to navigate Microsoft Suite. They just weren't as, I don't know, skilled, as knowledgeable, as expert level as I was. And so to me, at that point, I was like, well, did they lie on their resume or is my expectation different? Right. And the answer was my expectation was different. I don't think they lied on their resume for that. I think it genuinely was our expectations didn't match. And so then I could say, okay, great. Can I teach this person that stuff? Yeah, easy.
Yeah.
And then
Or if
go ahead.
I was just going to add, like, or if it's a good example to use because or if it's that you really need that person to do something specific within Microsoft Word, then you can be able to ask like, hey, I see that you're proficient in this on your resume. Here's what I need somebody in this position to be able to do with it. Do you know how to do that? And then to your example, Stephanie, of like, okay, walk me through how you do that. If
Absolutely.
that's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you were also saying like, and maybe they're just new, right? Like I've seen many leaders who fall into the trap of they're not picking it up. Well, what are they not picking up and what are you not showing them? And again, what is your expectation? If it's your expectation that they are as quick as you are and as fast as you are and have as much knowledge at this as you do, that's an unfair expectation to put on someone a month into the job. So, it's sort of that like, give the grace and train, but also make sure you're asking the right questions.
Yeah, and be realistic. Again, like you were saying, Diana, like at what level would we expect them to be able to execute this task after 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, right? Like I think sometimes it's even breaking that down on even your own internal expectations of like, yeah, like are we hiring for a true expert who should be able to come in and do this task day one? Or can we be really honest with ourselves based on where we're at or where our budget's at? Maybe we're hiring for more of an intermediate level person in this skill area, which means they're probably not going to be excellent at it day one, or maybe even week one. But maybe by the end of month one, if we trained them properly and they had some baseline knowledge they came in with, they could really, really learn this. And it kind of makes me think a little bit about the other term we brought up, the skills maxing, because some of my reaction to skills maxing is like, isn't it just learning? Are we kind of being hard on people for learning and picking up new skills? Because I don't know about you, signing up for a class or even doing any type of certification, or even if it's a LinkedIn thing and webinars, that takes time and effort. Like I'm not doing that stuff all of the time personally. So we're being hard on people for like collecting knowledge. And I get it, like, because you're like, oh, they're just collecting certificates. They're trying to puff up their resume. But also, don't you want somebody who really wants this job and wants to learn? Like that one I'm struggling with more.
I will pick a learner over a naysayer every day, right? Like the people who are like, you know what? I did do a class on this. I'm not an expert by any means, but I tried it. I played it and I can figure it out. I'm going to choose that person over the person who's like, oh, no, I won't. I refuse to do that, right? Or the person who's like, that's just not my thing, or I don't like that, right? I'm going to choose the learner every day.
Yeah. Maybe where the skills maxing can be problematic is if it's like in a position where somebody is sort of just saying like, I'm going to go collect all these skills and then I have an expectation that I should get a raise or I should get a promotion, when it's like, well, that's great that you want to learn, but it's maybe not relevant to the job. Or like, that's a cool skill. It doesn't directly relate, or that's just not how we structure promotions and raises within our organization, right? So like, I think that's where it can be problematic if it causes people to sort of like have this expectation that they are owed something by their employer because of it, right? And if it's very voluntary and not part of the internal processes for that, right?
Yeah, I think that's well said. And I've heard employees say that before, where they're like, well, I went out and I got this certification or I did this degree and then they still didn't give me the job. And it's like, well, yeah, like you still have to be the right candidate for it. And I'm a huge believer in education and learning. And also there's certain things that you just do need to learn by doing and experiencing and having that hands-on stuff that sometimes, reading the book on it isn't quite enough. But yeah, I think that's when, just in general, like if you're an employer judging somebody because they've collected a bunch of letters behind their name, like take a second glance at that. Don't write a story. And again, like to Bethany's point of like, yeah, if they're coming to you and saying, well, I deserve this because of this and all those letters behind my name or X, Y, and Z, yeah, that's not the right approach. But also like, don't let that deter you, maybe because someone is a more eager learner than you are on the team. Yeah. Well, this has been an interesting discussion. I've appreciated hearing both of your viewpoints on this because again, I kind of love it when I hear a new like buzzy corporate jargon word to kind of like debunk it or demystify in some ways, or to say, when does that really happen? Because I think what I heard all of us say was like, I think skills fishing probably does happen. I think it is harder to hire now than it used to be. Like the world just keeps getting more complex. So this is harder. And at the same time, I think there's a lot of things you can do as the employer before you hire someone to make sure you've really thought about this role and what you need and what skills you actually need. You've created onboarding and training that sets people up for success. You're not just coming in and being like, great, you got the job, now figure out how to run the plant. And that's their first day, right? Or run the whole company or run this whole thing. So it sounds like, yeah, there's probably just as much work you need to be doing just to prepare for this position and really understand what you need and in comparison to the amount of time you maybe spend in an interview with somebody. But any final thoughts?
No, I said no, but what I actually meant is yes. Yes, and I agree with you, and I do think that it is harder probably to hire now in some ways because it's hard to know like what's real and what's not. And I think it's also hard for people who are applying for jobs right now, harder than ever too, because they're competing with probably a lot of AI resumes and internal tools that are like that are also like reverse scanning resumes, right? And so there's sort of like, it sort of rewards probably, I'm guessing, I'm not an expert on it, but I'm guessing that it also kind of rewards those internal like technologies used to scan resumes are rewarding probably overly processed resumes, right, that have used a lot of AI to be able to sort of like game the system. And so so I think it's happening on both sides too. And it's a challenging game to play on both ends for both employers and future employees, candidates, right? And so I think that, we're advocates of we're called People Centric for a reason. And so we're not anti-technology by any means. But I think just be aware of those components of it so that you can just remember that we are human, and how do we not be overly reliant on our technology and still see the person on the other side of the resume or the email or whatever along the way.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, We hope this has been helpful or interesting food for thought for you today. So if you have any thoughts or feedback for us, or maybe you've encountered this in your business, send us a note. We'd love to hear those stories from you of like, how are you dealing with this complex hiring environment? So be sure to listen to the outro for how to get a hold of us if you have a thought you'd like to send our way, and we'll see you back here soon.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic.